We're back.
We're back.
Today we talk about strategy number 19 from the 33 Strategies of War by Robert Greene, which is envelop the enemy, the annihilation strategy. Why don't you open up? Why don't you start us on this strategy?
For a change? You know, what I find that it's really interesting is that, okay, you do it physically, right? With your troops, how he's describing that the horns come out and they envelop, the people. And as they attack the front, the front recedes. So it brings them in. It's really super cool. But what I found that was really interesting is that he's also talking about enveloping the enemy psychologically. If you can do that psychologically, you defeat the enemy before we get out in the field. And that's something that I remember a lot Mike Tyson talking about. Mike Tyson would look at his opponent with killer eyes and he was ready to rumble. And many times, the opponents either looked down or to the side or whatever. They couldn't continue with his gaze. And he knew right there already that he had him. And the opponent knew also. I'm going to lose, because you can't have any doubts whatsoever when you're going into war. You can't, or else you already lost it. So what I like is that he's talking about enveloping the enemy psychologically also. Yeah. I love it.
I like the example Greene brought up about also Hitler and Churchill. How Churchill didn't actually have that many soldiers, I guess, and that much power, but psychologically he found out that Hitler was paranoid, and so he made Hitler believe that potentially they could be attacked from many different angles, not just from, let's say, one particular place. And so Hitler spread himself very, very thin, which Greene was arguing was part of the cause for Hitler's defeat.
Mm-hmm.
And so by creating panic and confusion, you make your opponents lose their minds. That's what Greene is arguing.
Yeah.
And you do that by enveloping and, trying to surround, let's say, the opponent. But it also leaves you in a vulnerable position if you are not successful, because you're now spread out and your forces can be taken out fairly easily at that point. So you have to be able to, if you're going to do this, follow all the way through.
Right. Your troops have to be organized, and they have to know the formations and how to do it, especially, in the older times. But that's why, Greene also talks about Shaka Zulu, the way he perfected this form of attack. And it was just tremendous, because they were facing firepower that was way beyond the capabilities that they had with those big long spears that they created and so forth. But their techniques is what beat the British in the initial war, because every time they were reloading, that took a while, even to the best men that was able to reload efficiently. Mm-hmm. And so they enclosed the circle every time, but many of them lost their lives, right? But they ended up winning that particular war. So it's very interesting. There's a give and take in war all the time. As you guys know, today's day and age, what's today's date? 24th of June?
No, today's the 25th.
25th of June. Okay, 2025. We're involved in a lot of things internationally.
Yeah.
And so, striking and being secretive about it and so forth. I mean, war is no fun. Okay, war is no fun. There's always casualties, but sometimes they're inevitable. In the case of the Zulu people, they were defending themselves, because the British was just trying to take their land, So they were actually defending themselves. So they had a big, huge motive to fight, and to die for.
And the way
And many
they
did.
and many did it, and the way that Green described them, they were hiding in this. It was a part of the mountain that I guess some sort of
High grass
they were.
and
It was high
rocks.
grass, but specifically it was like I thought of it like a canyon.
Yeah.
He was talking about them being. They were all hiding in there, the Zulu warriors, and then all of a sudden they just come out of the ground. And the way that I was thinking of it was like almost like, let's say, like ants coming up, and then they just came out, and they came out of nowhere. It appeared, and then they were using the high grass, and they would get closer as the British were reloading. They would just encroach until they were there, and they would disembowel you.
Yeah.
And they created this fear in the British of, I could be next, because these guys were willing to die to get to
Exactly.
the opponent,
Right.
to the enemy. How does this apply in let's say day-to-day life?
Day-to-day life.
Yeah.
So I've been thinking a lot about that. See, because we're always talking about the fact that Robert Greene has a gift, right, of storytelling. I really think that that's his tremendous gift, and that's why he's so successful. He's penetrated me, okay, in the way he applies things. And I see him in shorts somewhere else. And so I picked up something else out of the book for this podcast. So he was talking about how do you apply these tactics in today's business world.
Mm-hmm.
And I took it very much to heart. And so here it is. I am going to embark on learning artificial intelligence better than the little that I know, whether I have to take classes or whatever. And I think that artificial intelligence will be the medium to envelop the enemy. And the enemy may not necessarily be a competitor. The enemy can potentially be the development of technology in today's day and age, which potentially can do away with all our jobs or many jobs.
Yeah.
I was reading an article where this doctor, who's an X-ray medical doctor, he's developed the ability to read X-rays in the last 12 years perfectly. Let's say he can pick up a pneumonia here, there, whatever. But here comes artificial intelligence, and they provide the same X-ray to the artificial intelligence, and the artificial intelligence reads it in 3 minutes. And it's exactly as this doctor would do. And he says, oh my goodness, it took me 12 years to develop this acid, this technique, to the point that I have today. And here comes artificial intelligence. And in 3 minutes, they show him this X-ray photo, and they can read it just as good as I can. And by coming up with that diagnosis, they can determine the treatment. So what do you do with this doctor? Do you take this X-ray technologist or this doctor away? Because artificial intelligence
So
is...
technology, you're going to use AI.
I'm going to
tool.
learn, because you're looking at somebody that knows very little about AI.
But technology is also the enemy in this example that you're giving, because it's going to replace so many of us.
Well, I'm very much into the AI revolution. I've been looking at it for some time, but I've made the decision to take action and to learn it. I saw somebody doing an interview the other day, and I'm looking at the interview, and I didn't realize that they were interviewing an AI persona.
Yeah.
And so the guy says, well, what are you looking for in benefits? Oh, nothing. Well, do you need coffee breaks? Oh, no. Well, how many hours can you work? And he says, I can work 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Oh, and so they're interviewing. It was very interesting. Okay. Well, how about sick leave? Oh, no, I don't get sick. Oh, well, I see here you have a wide array of expertise. You can do marketing, you can do research, you can do this, you can do that. And how many words per minute do you type? And he says, I type about 3,000 words per minute. Can you get it? So we're talking about...
It's almost what you're describing is almost AI enveloping and annihilating humans.
I don't want to look at it that way because, we're going to need to improve tremendously. And I, for one, because I want to continue to learn and keep my mind active, I've made the decision to... I have another computer class coming up, not associated with AI. It starts in July. We're in June 25th, right? And so I want to stay active, but I want to learn AI. And so all I have to do is go on YouTube and find a YouTube person that's, and get started.
Yeah.
And I'm pulling the trigger on that because I think that's going to be one of the ways. Look, how do we get more subscribers? How do we grow more our YouTube channel? There's AI programs out there that take viral things and plug them into the YouTube and things go viral and so forth. We've done it the hard way. We enjoy the road, and it's transformed us.
I think the hard way is worthwhile. Now that you're bringing it up, I think the hard way is what separates you from everybody else, because AI is not unique in the sense that there's only one Pablo, there's only one Mike, right? With our experiences. And so that is what is unique. That is what will be differentiated more from everything in the future that is all AI. Things pop up also on my social media that you can't tell they're AI.
Correct.
Until somebody says, hey, look, the hand went like this, it glitched or whatever. This is not real. It's AI. This weekend I got together with a buddy visiting from out of town.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about fitting in and being different in this. And it just so happened that Robert Greene had shared something regarding being different. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because you're talking about AI. But the only thing that is actually unique is humans. This is my opinion. And this is something that Robert Greene put up. He says, those qualities that separate us are often ridiculed by others, criticized by teachers. Because of this judgment, we might see our strengths as disabilities and try to work around them in order to fit in. But anything that is peculiar to our makeup is precisely what we must pay the deepest attention to and lean on in our rise to mastery. So the way I take that is that we can use AI as a tool, but for those people that are, this is just my opinion, for those people that are 100% on AI and there's no uniqueness anymore to what they're producing, maybe present an argument to it, but I think that what will stand out more in the future is actual human beings with their own opinions, which our opinions are a compilation of a lot of other people that we've pulled from, I'm sure. But what do you think?
Okay, this is what I think. I agree with you and with Robert Greene that our uniqueness is what's going to set us apart. Okay?
That's in mastery.
Okay, I agree with that. I want to learn AI to use it as a tool, but not to allow it to think for me, because that's not going to keep my mind active. So I'm going to approach it in my way. Let's say the Pablo Pomas way, right? And I'm not going to do a prompt and have AI put everything out for me and create automation out of that and have 20 different videos that I can just plug in, because if I do that, even though it's automation and even though it potentially has a viral effect, and we might get a lot of subscribers or whatever. It's not something that I had a hand in.
Right.
You follow me?
Yeah,
So
you didn't
there's
have to use your brain.
Yeah. So I don't want to do that.
Okay.
Okay? Although there are people doing that and being extremely successful economically, okay? And if you make a lot of money, you're able to learn other things. If you have a source of income, okay, that's making you a lot of money, and you're able to continue to learn. If I'm not the type that's, gonna go to the beach and sit down and drink a margarita. It's not gonna happen, because I want to learn. I have to be doing something. It's a blessing and a curse all wrapped up in one.
Well, that's what we were talking about yesterday when we ran into that colleague, is that he's saying, look, if you can stay healthy, he was talking about you, and keep your mind active and manage stress, because I guess stress to him was a killer.
Yes.
Makes sense,
He's stressed out.
He might be very stressed out, but if you can, or he knows of people that have been very stressed out, and we know people, younger people.
Well, they're
40s,
having
50s.
strokes.
We know people younger who have had heart attacks, who have gone through major health things. They were 40s, 50s. It's not that old, But they maybe didn't manage the stress well, maybe didn't have a good lifestyle and whatnot. Nutrition and exercise and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So what he was arguing is that you can live a long life. He was talking about you specifically, if you manage the stress well and keep the mind active. And I agree with him.
Can't argue with that.
Yeah.
Stress is a killer. It'll make every organ in your body go haywire.
Stress will cause panic and confusion if you're not careful, and it'll envelop you. I mean, the mind is the mental piece of it. The mental health is so important. That's why a lot of people take to exercise or outlets to release maybe some steam. I think that men are meant to handle stress, and it pushes us forward, and we just have to know how to handle that pressure.
Direct the energy in a proper way.
Yeah.
Look, you guys can Google this. Okay, I read this. This is supposed to be true and factual. Okay, the mind is so powerful that it could either make you or destroy you. Okay, there was this gentleman that was worked in a big conglomerate, and he was in charge of stocking refrigerators. But we're talking about commercial refrigerators, okay? And so he was stocking this commercial refrigerator, and he had to do a lot of work, so he had to stay over hours, and then he stayed longer, and then he realized that the door had closed.
Ooh.
And he was stuck in this commercial refrigerator, okay? And he knew that it would go into freezing status to freeze the meat at 5 p.m. or something like that. And he screamed. Nobody was around. And so what ended up happening is that he started getting really cold. And you could see that it was freezing, and his organs shut down, and he ended up dying.
Oh.
Okay? This is factual. You guys can Google this. However, when they found him, a day later or so, they opened the door, and they couldn't figure out what he had died of, but it was that all his organs had shut down. It ends up that particular freezer was broken and needed to be fixed, and it was not working. It wasn't freezing. Okay? His mind told him, look, the hours is going to start at 5, and then he felt cold, and that's what they can think that happened. So there was no particular, there was enough oxygen in that place to last to the following day when they opened the doors. Okay? But yet they opened the doors and he was dead. And they believed that it was the level of stress that he went under,
Whoa.
that the stress shut down his organs, and he ended up passing away.
That's crazy.
You guys can Google stuff like this. There's many, many stories about things like this that the stress does to you. So if you're not able to handle your stress, that would be one thing that you would need to pay attention to, especially as you get older. Okay? But one of the things that was really interesting in this particular chapter is that Robert Greene goes on a limb, okay, and he says, the only strategy in history, okay, that there is no return, there's no success for the enemy, is the envelopment strategy.
Annihilating the enemy.
So the only strategy in history that has no return, if you're able to envelop the enemy, they're done. They're done. And I thought that was very interesting because Robert Greene is really sharp about not getting himself cornered. You know, he doesn't say he's excellent. You know, he's very good, right? But he went out and he said it. Hey, this is the only strategy. It's very interesting to me. You know.
Yeah.
So you know, how do we bring it to today's day and age? How do we bring this? Because he's talking about a gap in your defenses and a gap in, like you said, Hitler, his gap was paranoia.
Right.
In the Roman Empire, when, what's the name of the guy that used the elephants against him?
Hannibal.
Hannibal realized that one of the generals was extremely arrogant. And that was another gap in his defense. He used his arrogance and his ego against him. You know, rashness, not, you know, paranoia.
Yeah, and then you essentially are luring the enemy into a trap.
Right.
You remember, I thought of, when he was giving these examples, I thought of in The Godfather when Sonny gets the call from his sister that her husband had beat her again. And he got the call, you know, he bites his fist. He couldn't, right? But he gets the call and then he immediately drives on his own without his guards. And it was a trap. And they were waiting for him at the toll booth, right? And so they end up shooting him to death. But it was a trap. They knew how they can get him out alone. And it was by, you know, beating up the sister. So if you are able to find out the weakness of your enemy, and in this case, Sonny was a hothead, and a lot of these people who are in maybe high positions, they have like a chip on their shoulder or an ego, like you said. If we could find out what makes them tick, you're able to essentially lure in somebody into a trap. In modern days, I think of like in a business setting, we deal with people, human nature, psychology, specifically in the business world, in the real estate world. There's a lot of psychology of people. And one of the things that we've encountered recently was a huge stress for somebody was a move to the sellers. And we are representing the buyers in this case, which are excited to buy their new place. But the sellers were extremely stressed with this move. They have been there many years. And so you're dealing with these different personalities. And how do you keep it all kosher? And then, you know, we're representing the buying side. And then another agent is representing these stressed out sellers. And we can't communicate directly to the sellers. And so it's been a lesson for me, this particular deal, and every deal I learn with. But I think that that's, I always try to apply the strategies to the current world, because we're not in battles we are. The world is constantly at war, right? Different nations, but on the day to day, how can we apply this? And I think it's just really understanding what makes the enemy or the opponent or the other person you're negotiating with, what makes them tick. And, how do I, at the end of the day, accomplish what my goals are? Now, Greene is saying, if it needs to be done in the form of annihilation, well, here's a strategy to do it.
Yeah.
Or if they're going to do it to you, here's how you can defend yourself from the enemy enveloping you.
I've followed Patrick Bet-David quite a bit, and I've read a lot of the stuff that he's written and so forth. He's gone very political lately in the last 3 years or so. But, I remember him saying one time, he was doing a book review, and he was saying, look, people that are in power, they didn't get there by being a pushover. There's a certain amount of ego in everyone that has power. They got there. Their ego was one of the ingredients that drove them there, like persistence, getting up every day, pulling the trigger, all those good things that go with someone that is an entrepreneur that's trying to succeed, right?
Yeah.
And so, and learning how to, how do you say esquivar in English? Dodge the bullets that come your way, right? But he said, everybody that's up in power, they have an ego. The strategies show us that your ego can be your undoing.
Mm-hmm.
Your ego could have been what got you to that power. Okay? So you got to keep it in check as you do all your other ingredients, right?
Yep.
And it's difficult to do. In this particular case that you're citing, communication would have solved everything. Okay? What happened there is that, in an essence, we were lied to. And we're going on this particular premise when it wasn't true.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. That's difficult. But how do you prepare? Prepare yourself for those situations?
Communication.
Protect yourself.
You need to communicate. The laws that are in place forbid you from contacting someone that you're not representing.
Correct. The laws in the real estate world.
Right. You don't.
Here in California.
Right. You're not able to do that, and
Yeah.
so it is an issue. So communication would have resolved everything.
Yeah.
Because, that's what we do. We solve problems. This is a problem. Okay. You look at the problem, you isolate the problem, and you say, how can we resolve it? And you come up with a solution. Everything has a solution. Everything.
Yeah.
But we were not able to identify the problem because we were not told what the problem was until the very end.
Yeah.
And then it was too late.
War. Every day is a battle.
Every day is a battle.
So, initially when I came across this, I thought, well, the strategies of war, I thought, what am I going to be reading about Napoleon's strategies on how he had the formations? What did Napoleon call them? They were called corps, or Napoleon's troops. I think they were called corps.
Okay.
Each group of his troops, they were separated into different, I think, corps.
Okay.
But anyways, what is that? How does that apply? But yeah, every day is a battle, and especially for business people, anybody. But in our world, I look at it as every day we have to swing our sword. We have to fire away and to be able to provide. And the only way you do so is in business is providing value, and then you get compensated in return.
In business. But there's challenges everywhere. There's challenges in marriages, in relationships, challenges with your children.
Yeah.
not just business.
Yeah, war applies to every aspect of our lives.
Every aspect of it. And so, again, you need to analyze the battlefield, whether it's your marriage, because there's a lot of people going through a tremendous amount of stress because they've come to the realization that they must separate, right? Separation means getting a divorce potentially, and divorce is extremely stressful, right? Moving is stressful. Traveling can be very stressful for some people. So, there's different areas,
Yeah.
and you won't go wrong reading the book. You won't go wrong reading the book, folks.
We're fans.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to throw in on this strategy?
He said that the impetuous, the violent, and the arrogant have to be aware because those are the gaps also that can be used against them to bring them down. The impetuous, the violent, and the arrogant. And then he cited the Iran-Contra affair, which was tremendous the way Iran played against the Reagan administration. They pulled them in, and then later on they told the world about it. So made them look really bad. So check that out. Very interesting.
Politics plays these games,
Politics.
dirty games.
That's another area.
Yeah.
Politics. And we're involved with politics all the time. The politics of business.
Yeah, you can't avoid it.
You can't avoid it, man.
All right.
All right.
We'll wrap it up. Thank you.
Thank you.